The GAA Hour with Colin Parkinson is brought to you by Paddy Power, home of the Money Back Special.
And when I started running, I suppose I didn't stop, and when I got the chance to go, I said I should go, and so I opened up.
We're only the small little fish out there, so we are, and we're trying hard to make it through. But it's hard to get the breaks when you're the smaller fish.
Because I love this county so much, and it's just, I'm delighted the lads did it for the people of Waterford today, because I'm heartbroken.
Welcome along to the football show. Conán and Cian are with me here in studio, lads. It's the weekend of the draws. So we had 4 draws this weekend, and I remember last year we were saying that if you bet €10 on every game that weekend to be a draw, you'll probably end up at this time of the year up money, because how many games are there? 16 games, so 160 are down. So the 4 draws, they're like 8-1. So you could have made money out of Paddy Power just taking our advice. There's loads of draws at this time of the year, and these systems that are taking over the game now, because we have Cork at it. Who else do we have at it? Roscommon, you at it this year, and we've one more. Well, Fermanagh have always been there.
They've drawn twice now as well.
They've drawn twice. There you go, just back Fermanagh. So that's it. So there's been 6 draws so far in the league and 14 games by 3 points or less. So, we know the league is very competitive, and that teams are, obviously, when you separate them into the 4 divisions, that it's obviously lends itself to more competitive games. One game that wasn't competitive was the Dublin Galway game in Croke Park, lads. And I really think that this Croke Park League thing has to end now, because when this kicked off, right? Do you remember when it kicked off? Was it around 11 or that, or 8 or 9?
I thought there was a massive game, Tyrone-Dublin under lights, yeah.
Because Tyrone won in 08, 09 then. This is
I
when
think
it all
Tyrone
kicked
is
off.
All-Ireland champions,
so under lights,
Dublin, I'm fairly sure. Yeah.
And we had some brilliant first games of the league, back when Dublin weren't the top team, and they were brilliantly supported. Saturday Night Live, massive crowds, and you'd actually get surprised. Kerry played them as All-Ireland champions. It would be always the All-Ireland champion that played them, and it was fantastic atmosphere. It's not like that anymore now. Dublin are hammering teams. It's a procession in Croke Park. Croke Park has maybe 25,000. The crowd is lost in it. There is no atmosphere. Obviously, the way Galway played, and Dublin will play you at your own game, so the game doesn't even have much excitement in it. And in Croke Park, look at the Super 8s last year when they didn't have much, they weren't great games, but it just highlights, stop it, just play them in Parnell Park.
Yeah, and Parnell Park, actually, having played in league game there before, the atmosphere can be unbelievable, even though it's a very small attendance. It's just that the pitch, the crowd is so close to the pitch that you're always going to get that really sort of intense atmosphere, and that always helps the game. Always.
And the players feed off that energy.
I've played in some sparsely attended games in Croke Park, and there's nothing worse. They're brutal. You can hear everyone on the pitch talking to each other. It definitely impacts upon the game, and even more so at this time of the year. At least when I was doing it, it was in the summertime. At least it was warm, at least, but it's bloody miserable for
freezing
supporters
cold
and players.
Yeah, no atmosphere to buzz off, no cheers, and then the game doesn't lend itself to the crowd.
I think
involved.
Once the novelty wears off, I think anyone who's going up there to play their first game against Dublin and Croke Park or whatever it is like, oh, this is brilliant. But after you've done it once or twice, it's like, oh God, this is rubbish. You'd rather be playing in a provincial venue where there's a bit of bite to the whole thing, and there's a bit of atmosphere, and that actually helps both teams, not just Dublin. So look, what could you say about the Galway-Dublin game, really? I know we're going to have to talk about it.
But it just on the Croke Park thing, because I don't think they're even making money out of this, because there's a need. The talk is that they need more than 30,000 to break even or something. So do you know the whole thing of this? It's to promote GAA in Dublin, and it's to get more Dublin fans in to see the game. But that's not a reason to do it. Dublin County Board need to step up here and build themselves a stadium, because that 30,000 in a 30,000 seater stadium, last night's match would have been a lovely showcase for a league game.
And Parnell Park, if you're talking about promoting it for Dublin GAA fans, I guess right in the middle of all these clubs and stuff, would be a great venue. I know it's not massive, but
it's the numbers
for
you see.
Dublin fans don't help though by going
season
behind
tickets.
They go behind Hill 16 and make the stadium look even worse. So most of them are camped in behind, and they're taking pictures of it, and the whole stadium looks empty from where they are. Yeah. That was 3 games yesterday as well. At least we're playing live, the ladies match is on, and then by the time Dublin Galway are there, the whole place is probably empty.
Yeah, don't remind me of that Laois game. But I got sent this yesterday on Twitter, and it's from a Dublin fan. He seemed to be genuine enough. Wayno, I think his name was. I don't have the actual Twitter account, printed off. So he said, now this is a Dublin fan. I understand that you don't want to turn people away. I understand that Fermanagh Park is a small venue. I understand the benefits financially it can have when big crowds are watching league games. I understand all the arguments, but at this stage I don't give a flying fuck. Maybe it's a bit rich, and maybe I've been spoiled watching Dublin for so long, and I appreciate other county teams and their fans would just love one day out in Croke Park, but I'd rather watch Dublin in a full Fermanagh Park than tonight at Croke Park. It benefits no one if the attendance aren't even reaching the mid-30s, at Croke Park even themselves breaking even. I'd rather see Dublin play every one of our league games away now than play even one game there. I resent a place during the league, and I should love the place. Ultimately though, I don't see it changing, and ultimately I'll be there come hail, rain, sleet or snow cheering on this phenomenal team. Like, I strongly believe that would Dublin fans want to go to an empty Croke Park there with no atmosphere? Like, Dublin fans are built around, like, their whole DNA is atmosphere and the whole thrill of supporting Dublin, and the team buzzes off that, and the supporters do too.
Yeah, well, it's just a less enjoyable experience when it is so bare. Like, I mean, think about it, a party in a room that's too big for the people attending is always worse. So that's basically, it's the same concept.
That's the reality of it. And Jim Gavin said after the game, lads, he says that Dublin are just getting into pre-season, right? Like, which is unbelievable. This is quote, and I quote, just getting into pre-season. And he says, this is another quote, we did very little work this week, so there was a bit of freshness in the legs today. So you read into that and say, they ran the shit out of them or did serious strength and conditioning before the Monaghan game. They did nothing to keep them fresh this week. Like, I don't know. I just think it's terribly depressing that Dublin aren't even training for this league. Like, they're not, and the best team in Ireland, because it's not at a good time of the year for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of obvious watching the game at times. You'd see, like, James McCarthy on a couple of occasions looked absolutely shattered. Not like himself, you know, he was harmlessly enough trailing after a Galway man, or, you know, but he wasn't the same energetic presence that you're used to. And he's only just back from injuries, done very little training. It just shows how incredible these guys are, that they've done practically no work and they're still able to compete with a Galway team who have, look, I'm sure they've done less than last year, but I mean, they're still training longer than Dublin are, I'm sure.
We'll talk briefly about that in part 2 as well. So Armagh unbelievably threw away a lead yesterday. So I'm reading reports about this, and this is just bizarre. So they're 4 points up after 69 minutes. And I think Armagh have some issues with this, because they did the same thing with Kildare last week. And I remember Laois going up, and I think they were 5 points down in injury time 2 years ago, and ended up beating them as well.
I think Tipperary in Division 3.
Quinlivan got the late goal. So this is a problem.
Stopped them getting promoted.
Stopped them getting promoted is right, yeah. It was a complete, I think, it was a brilliant goal by Quinlivan. So Armagh have issues closing out games. And there's no doubt about that. But Jamie Clark received a straight red card, right? So in all the reports, he swung back an elbow. So McGeaney was a little bit pissed off about this. He says a man got sent off for what looks like another man just holding his face and going down. The reason I put this in is because Aidan O'Shea did the exact same thing in Mayo Tyrone yesterday. So he's being tackled from behind. He threw his arm back, and I think he got McKernan in the face, or was sludding one of the lads. Aidan O'Shea didn't even get booked for this. Now, I think you should be entitled to, if you're getting fouled. They know what they're doing in that situation. They're throwing their arm back, almost like they're you know.
He's trying to shrug him off.
I didn't see
the Jamie Clark one, so it's unfair to comment.
It read like it was the same thing.
Yeah, but the Aidan O'Shea thing, there was absolutely nothing in that.
No.
I mean, he was being held.
But he still caught him in the face.
Yeah, but with the back of his hand or something, he's trying to shrug him off. It wasn't like a bent elbow, 90-degree proper elbow that you swing back.
It's like a flailing arm.
Yeah, it was just trying to. It's very difficult when a guy is actually pulling out your arm or your shoulder, actually get him off anyway. I mean, if you swing with your elbow, you're not going to get him. He's too far back. So he's just swinging his arm to shrug him off. No, there was absolutely nothing in the Aidan O'Shea thing.
But I always think there should be nothing in the Jamie Clark thing either, because if it's an arm,
if it's the same thing, then he's very hard done by. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So Doherty scored 2 sidelines. It's almost comical. So they're 4 points up. 2 sidelines drew the game. One sideline was a point. Get it back to 3. They got another sideline. The sideline went straight into the net. Like, I mean, that's just bizarre stuff.
It's just bottle stuff now. It's when you start questioning this now, like as a period goes on, you're like, oh, can they close this out? And it'll start becoming a thing for them. I think before the Tipperary game as well, there was a a game against Louth or something like that, where there was a last minute equaliser, and when you look back on the season, it's like, well, if they had won that one, they would have went up, but it got down to the Tipperary thing. So this is happening a lot now for Armagh.
Yeah.
And this will be a question.
Yeah, apparently that was a great game, according to Aidan O'Rourke on Twitter. That's ex-Armagh player, because it doesn't no surprise.
Well,
'cause
Clare
play
do play
great,
nice football.
lovely
and
football, and Armagh do
yeah,
too. So
yeah.
that would be no surprise to anyone. Another one here, boys, is very interesting, and the fella JP Mina brought my attention to this on Twitter. So I sent a text or two around to find out a little bit more about it. So there's a serious problem with the sin bin here, right? Serious problem, because in the period of the game where you think it should be most effective, i.e. 60 minutes, you're down to 14 men for the last 10 minutes, which should be an awful disadvantage. Roscommon went down to 13 men for 2 sin bins on 60 minutes, right? So in that time they made 2 substitutions and 2 players were down injured. One was for over 3 minutes. The ball was in play. This is coming from the Monaghan side now. They said the ball was in play for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds in that 10 minutes. What happened on 70 minutes? The board goes up. 8 minutes of injury time to make up for the time wasting. Roscommon have back to 15 men for the 8 minutes. Like, isn't that incredible? And they win the game. So, like, I mean, this sin bin cannot work under the current. I didn't realise this was the situation. So the ref, it's just 10 minutes. It's not 10 minutes of playing time.
No,
that's wrong, because rugby...
That's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable that this would be allowed to go on, because rugby, obviously, their clock stops on every incident. So it's 10 proper minutes. But of course the GAA just goes 10 clock minutes. Like,
I'm struggling even to get my head around that one. That's just fundamentally wrong. I mean, it's no
wrong.
penalty at all in that case. I mean, we all know what to do now.
Yeah.
If someone on your team gets a black card, just lie down injured for 8 minutes.
Now, we've talked about this shot clock a lot, lads. So the clock it's in the women's game, and the hooter goes off at the end. There's none of this referee grey area. Well, the referee's the only person in the whole stadium that knows when this is stopped. It has to come in along with this, or this sin bin can't work. This clock in the stadium that stops on every incident, and everyone is aware of where we're at in this game.
Yeah, the only thing
I've been pro that anyways.
Yeah.
Well, I think definitely for delays with injury, it should be stopped.
I think, with rugby it stops all the time anyway, regardless of sin bin, so it might be a bit more difficult. Maybe
it does always, yeah.
So it's easier to manage for a sin bin. Maybe you just reduce it to 5-6 minutes, but it's stopping for every injury, as Cian says.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that's what it should do. So the clock, anytime anyone's down injured, that clock in the main stadium has stopped until the referee blows continue. So it's not about sin bin. Sin bin just happens to fit in with the, you know what I mean? So it's not. We're not saying bring in a shot clock just for the sin bin. Bring in a shot clock full stop, because people are tired of this extra time from referees. And 8 minutes going up.
The amount of injury time in the last number of years has just been incredible.
There's 20 seconds
for
of sub now,
substitutions,
and now there's 6 subs on each team.
So every game is 80 minutes, but it's not really 80 minutes.
No, and like, I mean, I think this can work, and I think that the sin bin is unmanageable without this coming in.
Yeah, I'd say you're right. Would you have to reduce the time from 70 minutes to, what's this ball and play time, 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah, no, but we're not talking about ball and play. We're talking about just if there's a guy down injured. Like, you'll still have your same time wastage if a guy gets a free and takes his time over the free, or the ball goes wide for a kick out, or it goes out for sideline. Really, what you'd just be specifically trying to target is the likes of the injuries, and then if there are substitutions that delay the play within that 10-minute period, I'd say they would be the two that you would have to target.
Would be it. And the main one is the injuries, because like that's the
main
thing.
One is the injury.
If you're lying down and you get treatment, like, I mean, that can't be part of a punishment for the other team.
The only way it can work out is if you basically say that any player who's injured, the play doesn't stop, but he basically is carted off the field and play goes on. So if you're going to just keep continuing on with what you're doing, so it has to be one or the other, because it's totally ridiculous to have a punishment, a 10-minute punishment that you're only penalised for about what was that, 2 minutes 30 seconds. Now I'm sure that's
in and
an
around
exaggeration probably from the Monaghan side, but even if it was 4 minutes, I mean, you're still only getting half the penalty.
Yeah, Yeah,
4 or 5 minutes.
It makes no sense. It's nothing short of mind-boggling to think that would be it. But look, this is what it's a trial,
That's what the trial's
and that's
for,
what
yeah.
the trial's for. So, like, I mean, there's no one saying it's going to be perfect. If it was going to be perfect, although I wanted them all in without the trial because I said there's no problem with any
Send
of
them
these.
through.
These are all no-brainers. But I didn't realise this was the situation of the sin.
Second game. It's like, oh, hang on a second. We need to change it.
Jesus, right. So there was 8 minutes as well in the Meath Donegal match. So Meath pretty much threw this away. The goal was an awful mess up from the goalkeeper. We saw that last night on League Sunday. In fairness to Donegal, like, I mean, for Meath to not beat Donegal, the emotion up there and the tragedy, and listening to Declan Bonner last night that Jason McGee was really good friends with the 4 fellas who tragically died, and a lot of them would have known them. Donegal down a lot of first teamers. Neil McGee, Odra McNeilish, Michael Murphy, Paddy McBrearty and Frank McGlynn. That's 1/3 of your team on nearly, if you were to pick the 5 leaders, if you were to pick the 5 leaders on your team, that's it. And it was a chance for Meath maybe to go up there and get the win, and they should have probably won it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, at times in league football you can get fantastic opportunities, and you sometimes need a little bit of luck to when you're trying to get promotion, and everything really fell in Meath's favour, in terms of timing to place Donegal. I suppose leaving aside the tragedy, obviously, which, look, that's a complete unknown as to how that can impact upon a team, in the week. But obviously, it's going to affect those guys who would know them. So it's obviously devastating for them. And really, playing a game of football is not going to be even remotely part of what they're interested in or thinking about in that given week. So it was, from a footballing point of view, it was a very, very good opportunity for me. Then they dominated the game pretty much throughout. Should have been further ahead. Concede just a really, really poor goal defensively. And after that, then obviously that's a bit of a shock, concede a couple of scores, but still had opportunities to get back level and to actually win the game. So look, they'll be very, very disappointed that they weren't able to turn it around.
Yeah,
and get
that
the
would
win,
have been a famous win, really, considering where Meath are at the moment.
It would have left Meath in a brilliant position in terms of their league campaign, because they still have a further 3 home matches, and I'm fairly sure one of their away matches is Cork, which wouldn't be too worried about that one at the minute from a Meath perspective. So it would have left them in a brilliant position in terms of their promotion hopes, and it would have given them that sort of a bit of a margin for error. Whereas now the game against Armagh this weekend is a huge game for both counties, in terms of if a win keeps you in promotion hunt, but a loss has you really thinking, oh God, relegation could be. It's about staying in the division all of a sudden, even after 3 games. So it's just, Division 2 is just, that's the way it has always been. It's very much up and down, and you can see that. I mean, Armagh have drawn 2 games, Fermanagh have drawn 2 games already, so it's very, very interesting and competitive, as it always is.
It definitely is. Kildare, when you think of Kildare, you think of a team that's in really good health, and you think of a Super 8 team and didn't disgrace themselves in Super 8. Could easily have beaten Monaghan that day, were excellent against Galway and lost that one. And they were really competitive. Yesterday's win away to Cork ended a run of 10 league games without a win for Kildare, and prevents them from equaling an unwanted record winless streak from Kildare, which was actually from 1979 to 1981. That's from Ger McNally actually on Twitter. But interestingly, in this game, so Kildare were down a man for the last 27 minutes, right? And Sean White's 58-minute point was the only score Cork got in the last 27 minutes when Kildare are down to 14 men. Isn't that a terrible stat? So Cork still haven't won a competitive game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh since the 2014 Munster semi-final win over Tip. Not sure how many games that is, but a lot of league games thrown in there, whatever about championship games. This is just horrific stuff. We know Cork have gone back very defensive now. To only score 1 point when Kildare were down to 14 men, I don't know what more to say about Cork. It seems like we're repeating ourselves a lot about Cork every year now, and this slide just continues to. This slide could easily slide into Division 3 for them.
Yeah, that's what we were predicting as well, which we thought was mad. Suddenly you're Cork Division 3, and it wasn't that long ago they were beating Dublin in Division 1. So I don't know, maybe the fact that we're sort of saying they could go down to Division 3, is this part of the thinking? Let's just make ourselves harder to beat because we are sliding the last 3 years, so we need to do something else. Is this part of the thinking? I know it's a bit depressing that they would think that way and go that way, but That's the only thing I can see. You go up to Fermanagh, make themselves hard to beat. Go to Kildare, make themselves hard to beat. And that seems to be the
Kildare,
motto.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it does. And like, I mean, here's the thing from Kerry, lads. So these are the Cork, Kerry, Roscommon, and who's the other one I said earlier on that have changed to these defensive system this year? Are they the three?
They were the three anyway. I definitely remember them, Woody.
They were the three. So Kerry, here's from the match report from Paul Fitzpatrick. So this was on the GAA.ie, RT.ie and the 42.ie. So he says, the Munster men were employing a very defensive style with all 15 players helping out at the back at times. Kerry! Lads. Oh no. Kerry, Cork and Roscommon, three of our more footballing teams from last year, have gone to the dark side.
I know.
There's very few left now. There's very few left that haven't gone to the dark side.
There's very few left, and you know what? There's only still going to be one team that's going to win, and that's Dublin.
I know, that's the thing.
And the next best team will be Mayo. You aren't playing that way either.
They aren't playing. Here's the gas thing, and like, I mean, this I was given out in the office to Conán about this earlier on. So, no defensive team since the Donegal 14 have beaten Dublin. Dublin are more sophisticated now. Defensive teams now are routinely beaten by Dublin. Right?
By a significant margin.
By a significant margin now. So Dublin don't even try to counter-attack them a lot of the time. They just slowly build it up, knowing that they'll get through it when they go up there. You know what I mean? They don't even have to risk the counter-attack, even though at the end of the game against Galway they did it a few times. The game was over then. The only team to have drawn with Dublin in a really important match and actually could easily have beaten them were Mayo. And that's going man for man. Yet no one copies Mayo. Yet everyone copies the system that continuously fails against Dublin. It's bizarre, isn't it, when you actually break down the logic of that? Why does no one copy what Mayo did?
Well, I thought there was quite an interesting contrast between how Dublin's defending against Galway in the league match the other night was phenomenal. And Galway got a lot of bodies back, but they wasn't impressive in the same way that Dublin's defensive work was. And Dublin, in their defence, more often than not, they sometimes have spare men, but it's generally man-to-man in each zone of the pitch. So even out around the middle third, you'll see Dublin players are tracking their direct opponent, and in their defensive zone, it's man-to-man. Most other teams bring a load of bodies back and go with a zonal defensive system. And Dublin just picked their way through that.
Yeah.
The only team that have, really successfully got... Now, in fairness, most teams would tag a couple of players maybe man-to-man that they want that to be done with. But Mayo are the ones that over the years who have really given them most trouble. And that has been because they have gone man-to-man with them in the large majority of positions.
Similar. And they made for great games. I don't want to get into that too much because I'll keep that for part two. I want to move on to Fermanagh, who are now the new Black Death of Gaelic football. They've taken over from Gavin, who were given that. I thought that Gavin were always a little bit unfortunate to get that one, but it is Joe Brolly we're talking about. So the half-time score in this one, there's some sort of book needs to be written about Fermanagh's first halves. So it was 1-1 to 2 at half-time. 667 supporters went into Semple Stadium to watch this game. Now I'd say a lot of them might have left at half-time because it's freezing cold and that's what you're watching. So it was 2-5 each at full-time. So in the opening half, none of the starting forwards scored from play. This is not football, lads. This is bizarre, and it brings me back to an interview I heard last week. It was Colin O'Rourke versus Rory Gallagher. So it was on RT Radio 1, and O'Rourke came in. He was one of the pundits. I think it was Jackie Hurley interviewing Rory Gallagher, and then Colin O'Rourke asked a few questions. So O'Rourke said, now, will you try to be a bit more adventurous this year, Rory? And Rory's like, well, we set up our team. He's been really political, and Rory's well able to do this to the best of our ability. Do your players enjoy it, Rory? And then did they enjoy being competitive? Yeah, Colin, they enjoy being competitive, and they enjoy being able to put it up to other teams. Then he kept it up. So you mean to tell me you'll be continuing on with this year? Colin wouldn't let it go. But this is the point. I agree with Colin O'Rourke. Tomás Corrigan specifically told us on this podcast, in no uncertain terms, that no, he does not enjoy this. And Seamus Quigley's gone this year. Another forward. They don't enjoy it. So, I don't know. If getting up to Division 2 means that and I wouldn't mind, Fermanagh, this is all a load of nonsense, because Fermanagh were playing this same style in Division 3. And if they're in Division 4 playing teams lesser ability than theirs, they'd still be playing the same stuff. So it's a load of nonsense to say, when we have to compete with the big boys. There's no one would... This is the problem with Gaelic football. This is the huge problem with Gaelic football. No one would blame Carlow packing the defence against Dublin. That's doesn't even come up for debate. Of course you would. You're nowhere near their level. You have to try and stay competitive. Why would you play the same tactics against the team that you're arguably on the same level with and turn the game into a farce and have both teams playing defensive counter-attack football when they could easily beat each other playing really attractive football? This is the copycat nature of Gaelic games, and it's gone completely swept right throughout the country. And it's because it's an amateur game, I think, where teams can't come on the start of the year and say, against them we'll play this way, against them we'll have two clear, distinctive game plans. Because they're amateurs and managers in their defence are at work all week, they don't have time to do this, have all this work. They're struggling to get one game plan down. We know Gaelic footballers are trying to spend 30 hours, a lot of that's spent in the gym. In the winter months, you've got no light. You'll only have a bit on a shitty pitch on a Saturday or Sunday to try and work through things. So they're trying to get one done. But logically, not logistically, but logically, why on earth were two teams of equal standard packed defences against each other? Explain it to me, Cian. You're our senior analyst here. No, genuinely, because that's the frustrating thing here. Nobody complains of defensive systems. I'd rather see Carlow stay competitive with Dublin than seeing Kerry versus Clare last year, for example, in the Munster Championship, which I was bored at half time. It was just not worth talking about in a similar manner. Why are these teams of level ability in the league when you have four distinct divisions? They're four divisions of equal or close enough standard. Are we seeing predominantly defensive systems, with the exception of Clare Armagh, or of Mayo we'll talk about in part 2? Why are we seeing this?
Well, the players on the field are doing what they're being prescribed by their respective managements and what they're working on all the time. That's just the way it is. If players in the privacy away from it were being offered an opportunity to talk about what way they'd like to play, I'm sure they'd all have a different view. On every team you play with, everyone will have a different opinion on who should play where and what tactic you should use for a given game. Look, that's what the managers are in place to do. I don't really understand why teams play the way they play. The defensive styles that these teams play.
It's copycat. It's brain dead.
Part of it has to be an element of that. Sometimes it is down to the type of player that you have in a given county. Now there are some counties who, if we're to take Fermanagh, just given population and everything, they have a much smaller pick, which means that rather than them playing the style that they currently play, and that's fair enough, that's their own prerogative and best of luck to them. But to me, it's a bit of a travesty that players like Tomás Corrigan and Quigley, who are clearly very, very talented footballers, that they are not, that there's an inability to bring them along with the group in that type of a scenario where they're just sickened to the whole thing. And Tomás Corrigan has pretty much said that, and he, that's a trend that he's had for a number of years. And I've seen him play in a league game against Meath at centre forward and absolutely destroyed us. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, really skillful player. But players like that need a platform to play. If you're playing in a forward line with one player up or two players up, it's impossible. You can't, and there's no enjoyment actually to be gained from that. As a player who plays in the forwards, there is absolutely no enjoyment. The game is torture. Training is more enjoyable than that because at least you get to touch the ball in training and you get to kick the ball and have a few shots or whatever the case may be, or go for things. Whereas there's definitely an element of over coaching in terms of everything being prescribed. I don't know why they go defensively because it doesn't work.
Here's my point.
It's been proven it doesn't work.
I don't think it's coaching. I think there's a lack of coaching. This is the problem. People think bringing 5 forwards back to help your defenders is coaching. I think that's brain dead. I think that's so easy. But listen.
Willie, I think it's more than just defensive stuff. It's the fact that every single team practically plays a running possession-based game. That's a problem with the game, not a problem with every team.
That's because there's sweepers and defensive systems. You have to play that game.
I disagree with that. Just because there's a sweeper there doesn't mean you can't kick the ball.
There's more than one sweeper.
It means you just don't kick the ball to him. If you're a good enough kick passer, you can hit a 10 or a 20 You know, you can hit a 10 metre square space or 5 metre square space from 40, 50 metres. Of course you can.
If there's 14 in there, like in behind the ball, you're not going to have a kicking game then.
I accept that, but that's only when it's delayed that far. If you're that slow bringing the ball up the pitch that you're allowing the opposition get 14 men behind the ball, that's a different thing.
That's it. And Mayo
that's a totally different
exactly.
thing.
Mayo showed that up. And here's one point I want to make on it before we finish up here. How, if you need that many men back to keep the score down, then before 2011, when there was no defensive systems, surely every game finished 5-30 each. Like, what happened defending man on man? I remember the All-Ireland final 2013, Dublin and Mayo was 15-13. How is that not a turkey shoot? How is every All-Ireland in history not a turkey shoot when it was 6 backs versus 6 forwards? The reason is because teams used to defend man on man, and they weren't high scoring games. You could have games back then without packing the defence, and it could end up 13-11. Why was that? Good fecking one-on-one defending. It can be done. Your full forward line mark, full back line mark from the front. Half back line don't even have to follow their men into midfield. One can stay back and sweep. You don't have to mess up the whole structure of your system, of your shape, to suddenly be good defenders. Or else what happened to defenders 20 years ago, 10 years ago? How were they good defenders? Because they were just good defenders. You don't need to have 15 in there to be a good defensive team, no?
Well, I think the one thing that probably has, look, it's the single biggest factor really, is that the players that are playing at intercounty level now, just conditioning wise, their ability to cover the ground at speed is just far and above what it would have been 10 or 20 years ago. And that means that you have cornerbacks and half-backs that have an ability to do repeated high-speed runs up and down the length of the field, which means that they have to be, if they're not tracked, like it's the same as every overlap. So, you know, these support runners, if they're not tracked, they're going to steamroll through a team. So that has the net effect of that is that players, forwards on the opposition team, have to go with those runners.
Yeah, that messes
and it ends
up.
And that kind of changes the shape of the game. So, I mean, teams that don't have that physical capacity to go with these runners tend to just say, well, I'm going to have to run back after them anyway, so I might as well get goal side earlier in the move. So they end up just jogging 5 or 10 metres ahead of that player all the way back into their own defence. And that's part of the problem that has changed the thing. Or it's just the evolution of the game. So I think that there's a lot of teams have tried to find, when I say a lot of teams, some teams have tried to find a sort of a hybrid between a more traditional based kicking style of play and one that has running power in it, which with Mayo are probably, like in an open game of football where you have Mayo up against Dublin, it is more often than not over the 70 minutes, it's quite an open game with a lot of man-to-man contests, and there's plenty of kicking, there's plenty of transfer of the ball fast. When you have a team that wants to play that way and they come up against a team that for their own reasons choose not to play that way, it's a totally different type of game. And you have that where Dublin have had to learn to play outside this screen, but Dublin can do that. Dublin are the one team that can do that at their ease now. They, I don't know if Mayo are there yet when they come up against a really defensive team. Can they win a game like that at their ease? I suspect that over the course of this league campaign, if they come up against it, I think they'll struggle initially, but then they will eventually break it down, because I think James Horan will have them coached in such a way that they'll be making good decisions.
Yeah, we'll talk about Mayo now next. Just quickly, Brendan Murphy wore 3 different Carlow jerseys yesterday, 3 different numbers. So he wore number 8 to start off with as usual, went in, got his arm strapped up at half time and picked up a jersey that he thought was his, and it ended up being Paul Broderick's number 13 jersey, and he got injured in the warm-up, so he comes out in the second half wearing number 13, Brendan Murphy, and he plays on for a few minutes until Carlow management and the linesman realised this lad's wearing 13 and then gave him a subs jersey. So there's an interesting random, it's not even interesting, is it? But the reason I wanted to mention that is because Carlow had a brilliant result again away to Westmeath, which is a really difficult place to go, Cusack Park. And I saw a video of the last minute free that they weren't given. So it was a hand pass across into midfield, and Sean Murphy comes bursting onto the play as he always does, and he's clearly fouled from behind and falls forward, and the referee just blows it on. Like, I mean, it's a draw at the time. Referees bottle those calls. Like, I mean, Westmeath did have a few chances to have won it there was no score in the last 10 minutes, but Carlow clearly had a free that would have won and been a real famous, and Carlow could have been almost thinking of promotion if they had a won away to Westmeath in there. And that's taken off them for a referee that bottled the decision because he wanted to kind of, keep this as a draw and keep everybody happy.
Keep me out of it, sort of thing.
Keep me, yeah, which is really disappointed. All right, we'll come back next and we'll talk about Mayo. All right, so how good were Mayo yesterday, lads? And this was just fantastic, and it would really just, I don't know, I was in a good mood watching it. Some of their moves, some of their support play, just they were decisive. The one thing about Mayo is that when they were on the attack, they made the attack count, right? So they're a lovely little ball into Andy Moran, a lovely offload, a point. Now, we saw that loads of times. It was like Kerry at their very best when they're playing really slick football. Lovely little diagonals on the passes. Everything you think of about Gaelic football, the way it should be played, was just brilliant. And the thing about it, though, is they were so decisive in their attacks. When they attacked, the move ended. Not often did you see Mayo yesterday get the ball into attacking zone and recycle it back out. Then the move's gone. Tyrone are back in then. Mayo made it count. They did everything at pace. Everyone had support. There was options for everyone running. And this is a huge credit to James Horan for the short period of time he had them. Their half backlines rampaging again. It's like the old Mayo under James Horan. On the evidence of yesterday, we can't really use the Roscommon game because it was a bit of a farce with the weather. But on the evidence of yesterday, this is Mayo back to their James Horan in his first time with them.
Yeah, I thought they played really nice football. They lots of kind of nice kick passing, changing the point of the attack. I thought their movement up front was really good at times. Jason Doherty, I thought, had a really good game again. Just he plays that link role in the half forward line really well, where it's a kind of an unsung role where he's the first receiver from the half back line or the defence coming out the field, and he generally wins it out near the sideline under a lot of pressure and has to just recycle the ball and then try. It's not a sort of a glory role where you get a few scores out of it. So it's a very difficult position to play, and he does it particularly well for Mayo, and he's a massive player for them really to give them that platform, because he gets them that 40 metres up the pitch a lot quicker, which frees up then runners to come off him again, which just increases the speed with which Mayo can transition from defence to attack. Thought Aidan O'Shea at centre forward really, he was. I think Matty Donnelly was trying to pick him up, but he really got the better of him.
He did. He worked very hard, O'Shea. He was very good.
Yeah, but I thought his kick passing was really good as well. More often than not, it was very, very accurate, and it opened up the play again, where he was receiving the ball, sort of in that middle third of the field and moving it with the foot when he could, when the option was
moving it from wide the field.
Yeah, into the centre.
So then the fella who gets it in the field, options left and right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like those balls from the wings into the middle area of the field, and you see it with soccer as well. If they pull one, instead of crossing it, just pull one across in front of that D on the soccer. Like, that opens everything up either side as well. Like, I mean, it's not rocket science. But the Mayo, there was a point on 12 minutes. O'Shea to Durkin, the lovely little diagonal ball to Moran, who offloaded to Reap, who offloaded to Tracy, and it was the two wing forwards. We'll talk about them briefly.
Really well, yeah.
Really well, and fearless and fast, and could take long range scores, and they were always in an offensive position.
Actually, a great word from them. They were fearless, Mayo, actually, and that's really what made them brilliant under Horan, was that they just went out and they attacked the game, they attacked the ball, they just had a bit of faith in themselves and went at the game. Whilst obviously having a bit of tactical nous as well in terms of their timing and positioning, but really to just be positive in possession. And it's amazing what players and what teams can achieve when they just actually have a bit of positivity about what they're doing. Yeah,
and like I said on League Sunday last night, that Tyrone didn't have a full-time sweeper, and I don't think they had the sweeper in the Sean Kavanagh role, because I think Kavanagh is unique to Tyrone in that he plays that role himself to the extremities that we see him playing it. Sometimes I think he's too deep altogether, but it's very obvious when Kavanagh doesn't play that role, Tyrone don't put another man in to play that same role. So that's what makes me think Kavanagh plays this role to that extreme himself. Because if there was obviously a system, whoever is in his role would play that exact system. They don't do that, but they picked Frank Burns at corner forward. And I have a feeling Frank Burns, it's very difficult to tell on the television, that maybe they didn't play a full-time sweeper, but Mayo are going man for man. So are Mayo taking that man off them? Do you know what I mean by following him around? It's hard to tell. But Durkin Lee Keegan, Vaughan, Diarmuid O'Connor, these are waving forward. What's your sweeper meant to do? He has to, you know what I mean? He's to push out. So I think without being at the game and knowing exactly what's going on off camera, it's hard to tell. Like, I'd be very surprised if Tyrone aren't dropping somebody back in around, maybe not as far as Kavanagh, but definitely back minding the house.
It sort of goes back to the point that Keane was making, though, about moving the ball so quickly that you can get forward before they get all those men back. And you saw, like, they had a lot of opportunity because Tyrone, especially Peter Hurt, kicked the ball short, so then it was always starting from Mayo's full back line. But the first guy got the ball, was just head down and bang, like he just went 30 yards, absolutely sprinting, and the ball was kicked, and then they had 3-4 runners off every time.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're doing that, you're getting in behind the covers. Like we said it last week, if you have
you're getting in behind the retreating cover, yeah.
If you're getting in, if a team is running back towards their own goal, chasing down a man or trying to get back, you know, behind the ball again, they're under serious pressure. You see it, defenders start lunging in. It's panic stations all over the shop. In behind, when teams get in behind your half back line, you are in trouble because you're all running back. You can't see where your man is if he's running with you because you have you're trying to follow the ball. Like, so it's very, very difficult for defenders in that position, and that's what you want to create from an attacking perspective, is that sort of mayhem and pandemonium where defenders are completely panicking. It's like if you get turned, Conán, I'm sure it's happened, you get turned and you're running back towards your own goal, chasing it forward. It's almost like if you're going to lunge, you're going to do something, you're panicking, you're not really thinking with a clear frame of mind. Like, so I think that Mayo did it really well at times, and look, Tyrone will be kicking themselves because in the first half they missed 4 fairly gilt-edged, handy scoring opportunities that would have left them, I don't know, only a couple of points behind at half time. And it's a different game. You know, when you go in at half time 2 points down, there's not a lot the management, there's no panic in the dressing room. If you go in 6 points down or 5 or 6 down, all of a sudden it completely changes the mentality in the dressing room and what management are saying, and that you really have to chase the game.
It's more of a panic.
Yeah, it is.
But Tyrone put a few nice moves together themselves, and they were trying to kick it more, but it's a bit confused. I remember there was a lovely ball from McClure who picked out McCurry in the half forward line, who transferred to Lee Brennan, who put it into Peter Hart. Now, the difference between Mayo is Peter Hart had no off-the-shoulder pass, so Peter Hart turned and shot. Now, he put it in the goalie's hands, he put 2 in the goalie's hands. I don't know what to make of Peter Hart. I've said this before, he flatters to deceive on so many occasions that top players just don't tap balls on their good foot into the goalie's hands from 21 metres. They just don't. I don't care.
Well, he's not. Look, I'll give him plenty of leeway. I think he's a runner. He's an attacker from deep. He's out of his comfort zone, and while he can be very functional and difficult to stop in the inside line, it's not his best position.
They need someone in there. Like, I mean,
but I mean, this is, to me, like, why, you know, Lee Brennan and McCurry are winning those, but like, if you're going to play Hart, he should be nearly the one doing that link role and leave them inside. Yeah. Particularly Lee Brennan. I mean, Lee Brennan, to me, he's a very skillful. He's a finisher. He wants to be on the end of the move.
Yeah.
That's what he would ideally want to be doing. Now, I know he doesn't have the physical presence that Hart would have, and that's a problem for Tyrone.
McCann tried to give him a good ball there at one time,
it's a massive problem for them. They don't have that physical presence.
They don't have any physical presence.
The same as last year. They haven't found someone.
They don't. So their whole system now is confused, because you can see them trying to kick more. Like, Tiernan McCann never would have kicked this ball, I'm thinking of, maybe you remember, from the right half back position, and he looked up. They never would have given those before. Now Mayo will probably offer that option because they're more attack minded, but at the same time they are trying to kick it. But it's interesting you talk about Mayo's tactics and moving the ball on by the foot, because we actually stopped talking about that for a while because, you know, defences were getting so many men back ahead of the ball. But now that every team is pushing up on kickouts aggressively, and they're all doing that now, because again, copycats, since bloody Jim McGuinness did it with Donegal in 2014, now they've all started doing it as well. So if you're pushed up on the kickouts, everyone's in positions, well then outside of maybe a full-time sweeper, everybody else is coming back and running back. So if you run the ball, you're running with you. By the time you get to the 45, all the fellas who are running at the same pace as you will be at that 45. If you kick it, you're beating them the race back. And Mayo showed that example. Like, Sludden, Donnelly and these lads are trying to get back, but the attack has got down there before them. So the shot is off before these cavalry is back in trying to slap. Like, I mean, it's just logical again. You keep talking about logic. And a kicking game works again. If you do your analysis on any of these defensive teams, right, they're pushing up in the kickouts. Let's use the kick pass, lads. Let's get it down in that danger area before they can get back. And the one thing you have to do, you have to get the shot off, because when they get back and you go on the outside of them, well, sure, then the chances of you scoring there are much lower, and the chances of them counter-attacking you are much higher.
Yeah.
So it's in your interest. I'd spoken the podcast before about in training using a shot clock. So you goalkeeper kicks the ball out. Lads, if you don't have a shot off here in 12 seconds, I'm blowing it up. Do you know what I mean? And you have to start that attack again and try to practice them into getting this off. And it kills me sometimes you see a corner forward in a one-on-one with a corner back, and he kind of half takes him on and then runs back and recycles it back out to the 45. Go at him, and if you kick that wide, I don't care, because it's a better situation to kick out for them than it would be us recycling. You know what I mean? It's the whole mentality and the philosophy. Mayo went for every one-on-one. Keith Higgins just went for that. He didn't think of recycling it back out. He just went for it, went for the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that worked brilliantly in that, just in that particular incident, whether it was by accident or design, I'm not too sure, but the entire centre channel right in front of the goals was cleared out. I think that's something that they have worked on, is to leave that zone free when the ball goes down to the wing, that the centre of the field is open either for a late runner or for Higgins as a ball carrier to head into that zone. Because what you're doing is, as an attacking team there, you're pulling the defensive cover out of the danger zone. And if Higgins breaks in through there and a defender has to come across and cover, it automatically frees up a player coming on the loop off him. So I thought at times they made... it's hard to know with Tyrone because they had such a poor first outing. It's difficult to gauge where they're at, really. So you don't want to draw too many wild conclusions from one match. But on the basis of what we saw, I thought that Mayo played very, very clever football and exposed Tyrone through their own good play, their own movement, not necessarily from a lot of what Tyrone would have done wrong necessarily in their own defence.
Yeah, I think the kicking game is confused unless you leave enough forwards up there, because there just isn't support for them when the ball does kind of go up for them. I think it's a little bit, I don't know,
you also need ball winners. Like Andy Moran is a brilliant ball winner, and Reap, in fairness to him, and Doherty, like they were showing hard for ball. Aidan O'Shea was showing hard for ball, and they were making it stick almost every time. Like that's an issue at times that Tyrone have had, and they played Donnelly in full forward last year, and he gave them something different, and McShane playing up there as well also gave them just that bit of a physical presence that that your smaller players or your lighter players or nippier players can play off that first receiver, and that's what they want to be doing. But Tyrone, it's just, you're right, it's just a bit confused. Now, in fairness, they didn't have that personnel on the field the other day.
No.
So maybe that plays into it. But
I don't know what they're going to do, because it's not, you can't just say, let's start kicking it more, unless you change your actual system. You need your half forwards. Like I keep saying that, you need that link. 3 inside there is no good unless you have a link man. So they need to change. The kicking game's no good. But we have to talk about the pass from Andy Moran to Reap for Reap's goal chance, which he should have shown more composure and actually maybe bounced that or done something. Yeah. But Moran feigned to kick a point there and just whipped it back across. I did that once before in training. I still think in my head about it.
Did it work?
It was one of my greatest ever moves. I did it, but I put it up into his chest. But I was running in along the side. I never did this in a match, because you need a lot of balls to do that in a match. And I looked like I was going to kick and just flicked it off the inside of the boot across to the edge of the square into I think it was Paul Lawler's chest. Now, no one else will remember this, only me, because I was so delighted with it. I said, that was beautiful.
It's amazing the things you can remember when you do something good in a game. But you know the great thing
but
about it is...
I did this in training, not even in a game. Like I still remember this. But Moran did this in a league game away to
But you see, the difference, Wooly, is when you do something yourself in a match, you've got the best seat in the house to see it as well. That's the thing. You see the flight of the ball. You can see it all happening in front of you.
Player cam on yourself, like it's the greatest of all player cam. That's about it, lads. There's not too much more to add to that. I was very surprised to see McCurry take the frees ahead of Brennan. I thought that was a real weird one. A real weird one bringing up that first free, just because what happened, I think Lee Keegan ran across, or it was Harrison just ran. Wasn't much in that, like, I mean, but McCurry's not... Lee Brennan is much better free taker than McCurry, which I thought was a strange one.
Yeah, it was a very strange one. Actually, I was disappointed because I saw McCurry and Brennan on the team sheet and thought, all right, Tyrone are going to try 2 inside, but they weren't inside together. Like, you know, Peter Hurt was in on his own a lot of the time, and it was McCurry actually who just got waltzed by Keith Higgins for the goal. Yeah. You know, this is like probably we're on to a point somewhere. We're talking about sweepers. A lot of guys back there who aren't really up to much.
No.
And if you just try and go at them, if you're a bit fearless, you can get past them.
But if you think about it, like Higgins' goal, I mean, he picked it up. He had McCurry in front of him, and I think it was either McClure or Kennedy, one of the midfielders, who looked. It was a tired enough attempt at a tackle on him. So I mean, you're not up against somebody that like Higgins with his pace, like he did exactly what he should have done in that scenario. He waited up, saw who was in front of him, says, right, I'll have a run at this lad.
Yeah.
So, look, it's a strange one. Like, I mean, if you look at that Mayo full back line of Cohen, Harrison and Higgins, I mean, sure, they were just bombing forward the whole time. So, I mean, it's a thankless task at times for Brennan and McCurry because they don't want to follow them more than the man on the moon. They'd rather stay up there. And realistically, they might as well have stayed up there because they're pointless going back.
They can't tackle and they don't want to tackle.
And it takes all the gas out of their legs then for actually trying to do anything from a positive perspective. Whereas if you have 12 men behind the ball, like, surely that has to be enough at times to close the gaps down.
Well, I think it's more than enough. I don't think I think one sweeper is is enough, and maybe a midfielder dropping back and leave you. This is the thing. Why are you using forwards to do so much work? And I'll give you an example. There's nothing worse than playing in the forwards when I was playing wing forward, which I played a lot. Wouldn't happen back then in the full forward line, and having to chase the wing back. So you chase the wing back, tackle him. He gives the ball off, whatever. You have to run back up to your position then. You take relax. Now I know there's super fitness levels and all, but they're still human beings. You cannot affect the game in an attacking sense if you're spending most of your time tackling and running.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So you're immediately losing something. Your forwards, whose principal function used to be to score, are now using maybe 70-80% of their energy working. You're going to lose something on the other side of the field. That's just, again, more kind of logic. It doesn't make sense. You let your forwards conserve their energy. What you will lose with your defence having to tackle, you might gain on the other side by getting more scores yourself.
Well, I would agree with you actually too. The thing about it is, if you are playing in a half-forward position and you decide, right, I'm going to play, I'm not actually going back into my own half here. Well, the onus is on you then as a player that every single time your team turn the ball over in the half-back line midfield, you're an option.
You're making a hard run, and that's how you're using
that's
your
your
energy.
job, but that's how you're using your energy, which means as soon as a man gets the ball, he lifts his head, he can kick it straight away to you.
Yeah.
Think of the pressure that takes off him. He's saving the amount of energy it would take to have to try and bloody carry the ball through and up the pitch. So there's an offset. Like, I mean, you can't do both. It's physically not possible for players to do both. Like, Paul Mannion and these guys get a lot of credit and press. Oh, he's back tackling in his full backline and this. He's not doing that for the whole game, and he's not making lung bursting sprints for the whole match back there. He spends most of the game in the forwards, and he makes
he might do two a game.
Are we still talking about the one example? Remember
the Oma, the famous one. Now Mannion does it, but like, he's following his man. But you're right. There's a big difference between that and fellas who are just Sludden and Hart and Matty Donnelly. Like, their GPS must be off the charts. It's constant back in place for the kick out, back up, kick out, back up. For God's sake, you don't even see Matty Donnelly shooting at the goals anymore. Like, he's pushing on here now. Like, I mean,
he's no threat. He's not impacting the game because
he's an incredibly accurate player. And Peter Hart the same.
There's some players that their skill set means that they need to be utilised in a different way, you know. And there are players like that. Like James McCarthy, for example, is a back who drives forward and makes those runs forward and line breaks and stuff. But his primary function is to do the dog work around the middle of the field and pretty much let the other players play, you know. And he on occasion will make those driving runs. Mannion's primary function, Dean Rock, he gets back a bit, but his primary function is in there making those runs because that's what his skill set is best served. He's not trying to do what Jack McCaffrey does. So you have all these copycat managers, as you're saying, trying to copy them with players that just physically either don't want to do it, aren't able to do it, and generally, if you're not able to do it, you don't want to do it.
Yeah, but that's just not to talk too much more about this, but that great point, and this will just show you how much energy is conserved. So the half forward is not running back, so he's saving energy. He's got those left and right runs. The half back now can see him, and we saw loads of examples with Mayo, and even the odd time with Tyrone doing this. Give a long ball. The half back doesn't have to follow that ball, so he gets a rest. Instead of the constant running game up and back and up. Yeah. Because you do that against Dublin, which they all try to do. How many teams have we seen? We've seen even Westmeath in Leinster finals be really competitive with Dublin in the first half when their energy levels and they're up and down. And they all get blown away in the second half. Dublin bring on 6 subs who are all fresh. So, like, I mean, you're getting tired as they're getting stronger. Would you not? The only team, again, Mayo, who can stay with Dublin for 75 minutes, are Mayo, who move the ball on through the foot and are not grueling their their defence and their attack with this. Like Mayo will definitely help, and Lee Keegan's a bit of a machine, but he's not up, back, having to do that. And again, I just don't understand why they're all copying each other and playing this same game when there's so many other ways of playing Gaelic football, and trust your 6 defenders and use your half back line to hold the half back line and not follow, and use those 3 as sweepers. Use all 3, because the other lads will send on their half forward line anyways, and just meet them as they come back down, conserve that energy, and have all your 6 forwards the other side. There's other ways of playing. How did Gaelic football survive for 100 years and defenders defend well before all this started? The analysis now is that you're organised in defence if you've 14 in there. Why do you have to be a good defensive team by doing that? You can defend without that and actually score more. But it's gone so skewed in one way now, it's frustrating.
Just copycat the best teams. Just copy Dublin, copy Mayo, copy Crossmaglen, Corofin, Crooks, the teams that win, like the best teams, copy them. Like they're class.
Yeah.
And they're winning.
Here's my thing on this.
Copy no one and play a game that suits the players you have.
Very good, actually do that.
Yeah, but now all the defensive teams are saying that that's what they're doing when it's bullshit. But here's the thing. Yeah. It's not easy coach teams to play like Corofin and Dr. Crokes and Mayo and Dublin, because how many more dynamics is there? I think the most basic game plan you can have with a county is get everybody back and play a breaking game. I don't think there's anything difficult about that. Run the ball and support. So all you're doing really is coaching a support running game.
I'll be honest with you.
You're not coaching and you're not coaching players on an individual basis. You're only coaching the zonal players, and I don't think that's coaching, that's direction. You're directing them to stand in areas and to tackle hard. But coaching defenders is telling them, I want you out, I want you to mark from the front, I want you strong in the tackle, I want you covering this side, I want you actually defending against him. I don't want you lunging in. I want you standing him up. I want you blocking. And all the old basics of the game. And I want you centre back to turn around and come back and double up on him when he's stranded because he's struggling for pace against him. There's a whole load of ways of and that's just off the top of my head, without even sitting down with a management team and actually planning and seeing what your players are like.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tangent and it's not true. I'm going to make a sweeping generalisation here, but limited players make limited coaches. Like, if you're limited in what you see and do and can do on the pitch in terms of your skill set, or the things that you see in the game, or the values you have in the game, those basics you're talking about. There are a number of basics, but outside of that, there has to be an appreciation of the finer skills of the game, which isn't hand passing the ball. Kick passing the ball is kicking is the skill of the game.
Yeah, and catching.
Kicking and catching. And unless those skills, and it's a risk. Every time you go for a kick, because it's a more difficult skill, inherently there's more risk. So I think that the problem is you have it's all risk averse stuff. It's nobody is taking what the positive outcome can be. It's always about the negative outcome of it. If you drill in, like I've played on a number of teams over the years, and when you have confidence from your manager, and are given the license to play and express yourself, things just happen much more automatically than this robotic thing of people having a fear of trying to do things, and you end up playing that sturgid type of football that we're watching a lot of the time from teams.
Yeah.
And that to me is inherently one of the biggest issues you have.
And the thing, just quickly on the risk, is you play a kicking game and you're getting that ball in early to Andy Moran. If that doesn't go to hand, all your players are goal side. You're losing a ball on your full forward line, which is not high risk. Yeah. You want to run the ball through Tyrone. They'll turn you over on your half back line. You're on their half back line. You're screwed. That's the last place you want to lose the ball. So I often think actual kicking game is one of the least riskiest things, because you've a 50-50 chance, and if it's a good ball, you've a 80-20 chance of winning possession. If you don't win it, you're not vulnerable. You've just lost the ball at the other end of the field. You have loads of opportunities to get that ball back.
Mayo tried a couple of high balls in Taden O'Shea that didn't work.
Yeah, and they were willing to do it. Yeah, and isn't that great? That direction was there, and it didn't kill them. Sure, Meath back in the day would just get it on in there. Now, I'm not talking 70s football. I'm talking 90s, Tolly Murphy and Graham Garrity. And a lot of the time it didn't come off. But when it did come off, Ollie was sniffing around Graham and it was a goal. Without getting it in.
If you think about it, how would Stephen McDonnell and Ronan Clark have done if the ball was never kicked into him?
Exactly.
If McGeaney wasn't coming down the wing and hitting those
Aidan
crossfield
O'Rourke
ball into him. Like, I mean, we can't just... Unfortunately, look, we're saying this from... as spectators of the game, really, and people like that watch, we watch an awful lot of football and go to an awful lot of games, and God almighty, some of the worst football you see is at inter-county level. Worst, horrendous stuff, because it's overcoached, risk averse, afraid to make mistakes, and it ends up in this shuffle up and down the field, brutal stuff. Like I said it before, teams playing at tactics and not playing the game.
Yeah.
You know, instead, like the best games you actually can watch are sometimes at the lower level of club football, where teams just go out and play the game, play what's in front of them, play man to man, and it's wildly more entertaining.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. All right, we've gone way over there, lads. We'll be back with Paddy Power performance of the weekend. Okay, first up, lads, has to be Fionn McDonough. 1-3 from play from wing forward. An explosive type of player. Fionn McDonough only knows one way to go, and that's at 100 miles an hour. He doesn't like to maybe jog and lay it off to the back. He's going for goals. His goal was outstanding. His points. I think this lad, I'm making the call on this fella now that he's a really, really good player, and he'll be wing forward for Mayo for the championship. He might need a little bit more strength and conditioning, but he only knows one way. He has that really important ability to be ghosting in unmarked in places. Like, I mean, think how hard that is when you're trying to keep the head down when no one's on you. He can do that. How against are you just popping up in acres of space? That's not easy to do. It's not easy to, and consistently he was popping up. So however he's doing it, I think we talked about that before, never really knew, especially when you're being tightly marked. How did these lads just ghost into oceans of space?
Yeah, well, I thought on a couple of occasions as well, where he just stayed wide on the field and snuck in behind the cover. Yeah, it's a great skill. It's a great trait to have, actually. Now, look, it was probably some poor defending at times, but it was a really good performance from him. I think he's Westport, is he?
Westport, yeah. So
Horan
James would have had him.
Yeah, would have had him for a number of seasons.
But staying wide is important. Like, he hugged that. He played like a wing forward used to. Like, that's when I played wing forward. That's how you played wing forward. You wanted to get on the score sheet. You kept it nice and wide. You waited for the play to develop, and then you were cut in at an angle and look for a pass off your full forward line. And the great thing about him is he knows Andy Moran is going to win that ball and lay it off. So he's just lurking around. This is the great thing playing wing forward. Just pretend you're uninterested. Watch the game develop. Midfield kick it in. Gone. Maybe go straight down the wing one stage, and at the last minute cut across your man and you've got your yard on him, and hopefully that is dovetailing perfectly with Andy Moran has it, and it did for him. And again, that's a skill that you learn as a wing forward, how to get that time run, because you remember you have to lose a man, so you have to have that done before that ball comes, and you usually lose him by cutting infield. You know what I mean? Your first run might be straight, then you're cutting across, and it has to be bang on. I'm not going to lie, lads, I'm very excited about this fella.
Yeah, it's amazing as well, the sight. Every time you watch the replays, it was like Tiernan McCann or McKernan, like two all-stars that were behind and struggling to keep up with him, and they just might have switched off for a second, and this was the new guy making his debut who were punishing two of the best defenders in Ulster. Like,
yeah,
you know, so
great raw pace on him too, doesn't he? Just seems to have a little bit more strength and conditioning, and that'll improve too.
And in fairness to him, he looks to have the frame for it as well, because he showed he's tall and rangy, and he did show a good bit of strength as well on a kick out, or won a kick out and drove away from a few men. So yeah, absolutely, like for a sort of a first dipping of the toe into the water of National League, it was fairly impressive, really.
Definitely. Right, Keith Higgins, lads, back to the old Keith Higgins, rampaging forward, corner back, put his marker in his pocket. I'm going to make a call here and say Niall Morgan should have saved that goal. He telegraphed that, lads. He might as well have said to Niall Morgan, he bent his whole body in such a direction that this was going off the outside of his boot into that corner. Am I right or wrong? Niall Morgan should have known that this was only going one place. Now, it was a bit of a rocket, I will give him that. But am I being overly harsh on Niall Morgan here?
I was going to say give it to him just because of the drop shoulder. Like, I just thought it was so good, even though it was telegraphed. It was just, keepers always go that way.
He totally telegraphed it though, lads. He totally, and he's a cornerbacker. I mean, you're not going to argue or criticise him for this. But Morgan should have been reading that.
I was actually surprised when it hit the net, to be honest. But it was, look, he struck it cleanly enough.
He did strike it cleanly.
It was unusual to me the way he shaped up to strike the ball.
Yeah.
It was, very rare you'd see a forward do, kick it the way he did, but look, it worked. It ended up in the net. I'm not going to blame Niall Morgan. He was close enough in, but yeah, an unusual strike, but a great goal.
An unusual, unorthodox strike, yeah. Niall Morgan, in fairness to him, scored a beautiful point from play. And again, this is one drawback of going man for man. You're giving them the free goalkeeper cut to go up the pitch, and he had a wide in the first half. And that's one thing that teams that go man for man, it's one way to counteract him, and that's send your goalkeeper up, because he has to draw a man to him. Comerford in the Dublin goalkeeper goals is refusing to leave his 21 metre line. He just wants a hand pass. He won't come up, and I find that very surprising not to use that advantage that Tyrone clearly were using with Niall Morgan yesterday, because he did it so many times.
I suppose it's the skill set he has. I mean, it's again, Comerford doesn't look like the type of fella now who'd take too many tackles coming up the field. Morgan plays outfield for his club.
Yeah,
he's shown a good. He has pace actually over the ground, which is a massive thing.
He does.
So the
doesn't lack confidence either. I think he likes the attention that a lot of goalkeepers probably do. But
in fairness to him, it was a brilliant score.
Beautiful, yeah.
Brilliant score, yeah.
Beautiful score. Right, Sean O'Shea, lads. So he got, what was it, 12 yesterday, 10 from play.
12.
Like, it's outrageous. Always, I think, when I think of Sean O'Shea, I think of my first season with Laois. And then you think you got over that, and then you come back to second year and you're a different player. You've that year over, you're not a debutant anymore, and you just have a confidence that now you're part of this setup rather than you're the new lad. Do you know that kind of way? And
yeah, you've adapted to the level.
You've adapted to the level, and this Sean O'Shea now, to me, looks like a fella who's like, I'm here now. And wait till we see Clifford, who's got over his first year. You just see a different way Sean O'Shea is carrying himself. Like although I think he did this last year, when he kicks those frees, he's immediately organising his forward line to watch for the... he's becoming just that leader, which he is going to be.
Yeah, going over and kicking sidelines as well when he wants to do it. Like, that shows you where his stature is in the squad. Like,
yeah. Did any of you, by the way, see Lee Keegan backing up McDonough when I think it was
did,
Kyle Coney? I love to see that. That was beautiful. And he ripped the jersey off.
He's
Coney.
an expert at ripping jerseys. He seems to know where the thread is, and I'll just pull here.
And Coney, I could see by Coney's face, I've bitten off more than I can chew here now. It didn't really, because I don't know, what did he do on McDonough? I don't think it was too much.
He had him a shoulder in the back just after the ref had given a free.
That was it. But I don't know if I told this story on this podcast before. But I'll never forget my first game for Laois. So it was in a league game against Mayo. I think it was one of my first games. It could have been an open up of a pitch or something like that. And I was marking Pat Holmes. And I was brought on as a sub. And when I come in anyway, Holmes welcomed me with a shoulder. But you're like, this is be bread and butter for me. So I started the verbals on Holmes and calling him all sorts. And whatever way we were verbaling at each other, next minute I come over, here's Hughie Emerson comes over, lifts Holmes out of it. Shut your mouth with that, lad. He won more than you ever won. Hughie just said something stupid, but he opened him, and I never forgot it. I just thought, geez, Hughie really looked after me there. Now it was half my fault because I started the verbals. But you'll always remember, Fionn McDonough will always remember that Lee Keegan came in for him in a big game like that when he...
But he's also his club teammate as well.
He is too, right, yeah.
So it's a big thing.
So he's used to doing it.
Yeah, in fairness, you would expect him to do it as well.
You would expect him to do it, that's true. But still, it's a lovely thing to... I don't know, I just think it's a nice thing to...
Well, to be fair, he wasn't going in throwing boxes. He just grabbed them and pulled them out of the way. It was harmless enough, but nonetheless, he wasn't going to leave his buddy stranded anyway.
Exactly. Ryan O'Rourke's at it again, lads. Leitrim Rising continues on, 1-3. Late goal, that's a great win away to Wicklow for Leitrim. We might get Terry Hyland or someone from Leitrim on the show on Thursday. Cormac Costello, lads, got 6 points, 1 mark, 5 from play. Took 20 seconds over his mark. I knew that. Kieran Whelan put a stop clock on it last night, but I remember watching it thinking, geez, he's going to town on this. Like, this is a big problem for referees not enforcing this, because we're all fond of that mark, but when they take that long, and Costello did the 2 breaths. And the whole idea of the mark is that you don't do you absolutely don't do a free kick routine for them. It's meant to be almost a version of continuing on the play, but nobody can mark you. Not to slow it down. If you get into the stage where he's doing his big 2 breaths and lining up, sure, I don't like that myself, and I'm a big fan of the mark. It's my rule.
It's too much of an advantage if you can take a bloody that long over it, I think.
Yeah, but what about Costello's performance, lads?
He was
was outstanding, wasn't he?
He was, he really, really was. His movement was really good. He drifted between the full forward line, the half forward line, you know, covered.
It's hard to know where he was playing, really. He was
left
all
to
over.
right across the field. Really good, very direct, kicked some really good scores as well, and linked the play too, like was creative, wasn't always just look, when it wasn't on he was making things happen.
He needs to make the step up here, lads. It's either all or nothing with this lad
think he
now.
will.
Like, I mean, do you think he will? Like, Jim will like a new face on that forward line, but where does he fit in on it? That's the thing. You know what I mean? There's not many places up for grabs. Maybe a full forward position. If you've got Rock and Mannion in there, and the half forward line's nearly set in stone. Scully's continuing on brilliantly this year. Kilkenny and Howard. So is that extra forward?
Conor Callahan.
Oh Jesus! Sorry, Cormac. Sorry, Cormac. We've just run through there. There's no.
Just come on and win the All Ireland for them again in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, John Heslin's back for Westmeath there, lads. Just another bit of news here before we finish up. Right, that's all the nominations. We're going to give it to Fionn McDonough, who is absolutely outstanding and was an absolute tonic, and 1-3 from play against Tyrone in Oma is not to be sniffed at. So congratulations to him, and we'll send him on a pair of Paddy Power Lucky Pants. Right, that's all we've time for this week. We'll be back on Thursday with another show, so we'll talk to you then. Good luck.